Hi everyone, it's Rita, your favorite book, TV, and movie nerd. In this video, I will be reviewing the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. This is part 2 of my Grishaverse Read-a-Thon series, so if you'd like to see my first video on the Shadow and Bone trilogy, pause here, click the link in the cards, and come back later. Without further ado, let's get into it. First up in the Six of Crows duology is the titular novel, Six of Crows. For this installment, I actually took some notes after I finished reading. All in all, I give Six of Crows a 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely my favorite book in the Grishaverse thus far. We'll see if it stays in the number 1 spot as we go along. My first bone to pick with Six of Crows is the format in which I read it. I didn't really have time to request a print book from the local library, and I was hoping that I'd find an ebook immediately available like I had for the Shadow and Bone trilogy. However, that did not happen. It was either wait forever for the ebook or find an audiobook. I chose the audiobook route. As I mentioned in the previous video, the first time I read Six of Crows, I listened to a bootleg of the official audiobook on YouTube. I tried finding it again, even though I didn't like it the first time, and it was gone. I do have an Audible account, so I used one of my precious credits to get Six of Crows. As I had suspected, it was the exact same audiobook that I had first listened to, which was disappointing. The audio quality was better, which made the listening experience a little less painful, but it was definitely not my preferred method of reading this book. I'm very picky with audiobooks. I have a love-hate relationship with them. They can make or break a book for me a lot of the time. And as much as I love Six of Crows, this audiobook almost broke me again. Like everyone else on the internet, I did not like the reader for Kaz. I can't exactly put a finger on it, but something was off. I didn't like it. Besides that was the fact that several things were mispronounced. And I know for a fact that they're mispronounced because I have heard them pronounced correctly by other fans, by Leigh Bardugo, by the cast of the Shadow and Bone show who have worked with Leigh Bardugo. The most annoying one that I can think of off the top of my head was at one point the actor for Jesper, which is even worse, pronounced Wylan as Waylon. And I was like, really? You're just gonna mess up a main character's name like that? Come on. And there were a lot of little mistakes like that throughout the audiobook that kind of just made me go, but why? Who was listening to this and went, ah yes, this is correct. My last complaint about the format is that it was too slow. The audiobook is 15 hours long. I tried to listen to it at normal speed, but I switched to 1.5 speed about 2/3 of the way through the book because I couldn't take it anymore. It was such a slog. Oh my god, it was bad. And again, I love this book. However, I could have read the print or ebook version myself in 5 hours or less. One of the main issues I have with audiobooks in general is that if the audiobook feels way slower than my natural reading pace, I get impatient and annoyed, and I'm like, okay, we're cranking up the speed here, people. It was like nails grating on a chalkboard how long it took. The meh quality of the audiobook definitely turned reading Six of Crows into a bit of a slog for me. Instead of reading it straight through like I was able to do with the Shadow and Bone trilogy, I had to pause it and come back to it and pause it and come back to it. It took me 4 days to get through, if not more, because I couldn't deal. Once I turned up the speed, then we were fine. I don't know why I was trying to be a purist and listen to it at normal speed. I don't know why I tried to torture myself like that, but whatever, it's over now. If it hadn't been for this slog, perhaps my rating would be 5 stars, but we'll never know. I should mention that I am a bit spoiled in terms of audiobooks. I heard the clips of the Shadow and Bone cast reading excerpts of Six of Crows and the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the actual audiobook pales in comparison. Not to mention, I know for a fact that a similar thing has been done with another book series, so now I keep comparing the two and I'm disappointed. If you don't know, the Summer I Turned Pretty series by Jenny Han got an audiobook revamp when the TV adaptation came out. I first tried to read The Summer I Turned Pretty a million years ago, and I couldn't get into it. Then the show came out, and I was like, oh, this actually looks better than the books. I watched the show, and I loved it, and then I was like, maybe I can go back and read the books. Maybe they're actually worth it, and I misjudged it. I didn't misjudge it. My first opinion was correct. However, I read all of the books anyways because the audiobooks were so good, because they were read by the cast of the show, and it was so much better. So, where is our revamped audiobook of every single book in the Grishaverse read by the cast of the show? And I mean every little bit. The actors reading their character's POV, and also any lines their character says in other people's POV. Give it all to me. Give me a podcast level performance. That is all I want. Please, Lee Bardugo, Audible, whoever is in charge of this shit, hire the cast of Shadow and Bone to re-record all the books in the Grishaverse. Thank you. On behalf of the entire fandom who hates the audiobooks. Thank you very much. Moving on to Six of Crows itself. The plot, I give 10 out of 10. Love Me a Heist by my favorite Six Hooligans. No notes. That's pretty much it. Characters / character development. Inej and Nina share the top spot for my favorite characters. I love the fact that two of our heroes are dangerous teenage girls. It's amazing. They're wonderful on their own. Their friendship, great. They hold the group together, all the things. Also, really great metaphor, because, teenage girls are seen as so dangerous, especially by gross men. And here they actually are dangerous and mess with said gross men. Amazing. We love them. Next, Pious. Makes me so uncomfortable, especially because the Grisha are an allegory for the Jewish people in real life, and the Fjerdans, specifically the Truskala army, are an allegory for the Nazis. So little Nazi boy Matthias, I could only stand him for the first 3/4 of the book because I knew he would become a better person and not a Nazi anymore by the end of the book. But goddamn, was I holding my breath. Even though I know what's gonna happen, my entire body went every time he simply existed. Until the last quarter of the book when he's finally like, I am not a Nazi anymore, and proves it. Okay, now we're good with Matthias. Next, Wylan. What a cutie. He has very little development in this book. I know there's more coming in Crooked Kingdom, blah, blah, blah. But Wylan is pretty bland in this one. Not to mention, he's the only quote-unquote main character who doesn't have his own POV. We hear from all of the other crows, Pekka Rollins, and some random dude at the beginning, but nothing from Wylan. If I remember correctly, there are several chapters in his POV in Crooked Kingdom. So, hopefully he becomes more interesting, because there's a little bit there, but we don't really get to see much of it in this book. Next, Jesper, love of my life. A little bit dumb, but very pretty, very good with guns, and a not bad fabricator for somebody untrained. He is the embodiment of ADHD and a bicon, and we love him for both. Similar to Wylan, his character remains the same throughout the whole book, though at least we get his POV. The only thing that really changes is how he feels about Wylan by the end. I know he gets more development in Crooked Kingdom, so can't wait for that, because I want a little bit more substance. I know it's there, but we haven't gone to it yet. TBD. Next, Hazel Dazzle, Casimir Brecker. I know that Casimir has not been revealed to be his name, okay? But Leigh Bardugo said that Kaz is short for something, though she hasn't revealed what. In my head, it's Casimir. My favorite little barrel thug. I love that he's so tough until he thinks of Inej. Just the smallest thought about Inej, and then he immediately goes, oh my god, she is so pretty and brave and smart. I love her so much. Oh, you're just a little baby who loves Inej. And this is why the entire internet loves Kaz Brecker. His whole arc in this book, but really in the whole duology, from what I remember, is the best he falls harder ever done in the history of YA. Last but not least, amongst the characters, I have a pretty long shit list. Similar to Shadow and Bone, it's all men who bother me, and also some governments, but same diff. They're mostly male down. Okay. Obviously, Vanek. Fuck him. Terrible person, terrible father, not even an honest mercher like he pretends to be, as if there's such a thing as an honest mercher, because they're all scummy, but whatever. Yeah, hate him. Can't wait to see him get his own head served to him on a platter next book. Pecker Rollins. Fuck that guy. Does more need to be said. But I will say that if you prey on children to get their money, you suck. The end. Brum. Literally Hitler of Fjerda. Hated him the entire time, obviously. And even though I've read this goddamn book before, as soon as we got to like 2 chapters before his appearance, I was like, ugh. I got so anxious about what was happening. It's a book, it's fiction, calm down, but still. So fuck that guy. And I really hope he dies in the next book. I don't remember if he does or not, but whatever. He'll get what's coming to him, I hope. Just for funsies, to round out our list here, I would like to put the Kirch, Fjerdan, and Shu governments on the chopping block, please and thank you. They all suck in different ways. Money and appearances and the advancement of science, which really smacks of shit race science, is apparently more important than being good people and feeding your citizens. Screw that. Next up, relationship development in this book. As we all know, this book really sets up the relationship development in the second book. It's perhaps not as present as we would like in this book. Inej is number 1, obviously. They are excellent. Give me more, please. I do know that more is coming, because I have read most of Crooked Kingdom. But still. In second place for relationship development is the Crow's friendship as a group, the 6 of them. Great. Need more. And I know I'm getting more because of Crooked Kingdom. And then Kuwait inserts himself into the situation. Okay, number 3 on my list. Helnik. It was good. I need more of Matthias self-reforming in order to be completely on board. But the signs I have seen so far are good. Also, I'm not emotionally prepared for the end of Crooked Kingdom. I may or may not cry. Last but not least, Wesper. The spark is there, but nothing really happens. We do get, like, halfway through the book that Wylan does have a bit of a crush on Jesper. We don't get confirmation that Jesper does actually have a crush on Wylan and doesn't just enjoy getting on his nerves. At the very end of the book, we don't really see them connect that much. I know more happens in Crooked Kingdom, blah blah blah. It's decent for what's there, but it needs work, which we do get in Crooked Kingdom. I'm okay with that. But last but not least, the world building in this book. A lot better than the Shadow and Bone trilogy, partly because the groundwork for the Grishaverse is obviously laid in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, specifically the first book, and partially because Leigh Bardugo's writing gets a lot better, even from Ruin and Rising to 6 of Crows. Now that I've read the original trilogy, Ketterdam definitely feels more vivid and real and tangible than Ravka in the first trilogy, or even the other locations they spend some time in. More than that, what I really like about the Ketterdam setting, and even the Fjerda setting, is that we get to see the world outside of the polished walls of the little palace. Not that we didn't in the first trilogy, but it was the place that Alina was trying to go back to the entire trilogy, which makes sense for her arc, but for me personally is a boring place because, as I mentioned in my first video, not really a big fan of royalty in real life or in fiction. The whole royal court thing, even though it's a magical royal court, is not super interesting to me. There's only so much of it I can take. To me, the world outside of the little palace, and more than that, outside of Ravka for both Grisha and non-Grisha, is infinitely more interesting to me than the little palace setting. This book is also much more explicit in anti-capitalist sentiment than the Shadow and Bone trilogy was. As I talked about briefly in the first video, it reminded me of the Hunger Games in that everything looks pretty, but it's actually really gross and rotten on the inside. In contrast, in this book, and if I remember correctly, the whole duology, we do see the quote-unquote prettier parts of Ketterdam, the prettier parts of Fjerda, whatever. But from the beginning, there is an understanding that Kirch, specifically the barrel in Ketterdam, is ugly in every way you can think of. And the prettier something looks in Ketterdam, the worse it is underneath. Everything about Kirch and Ketterdam especially is commentary about how people prioritize profit, trade, their own wealth, and their own family's well-being over everything and everyone else, which is not unlike modern Western society. The main characters being basically a bunch of misfits living on the margins in a place that is so impoverished, and everybody around them, from upper class individuals to the government, blames it on the poor people instead of taking a look in the mirror at their own policies and opinions. Definitely it's too close to home. Something else that's also much more explicit in this book is, as I mentioned earlier, the allegories to stories of Jewish people in real life. This book is much less subtle than the Shadow and Bone trilogy in its allegories. The Grisha represent the Jewish people, and the Fjerdan, specifically the Druskala, symbolize the Nazis and the Nazi regime. It is much less subtle because we are outside of Ravka, where, although Grisha are still persecuted, they can live relatively protected lives compared to the rest of the world. We have Matthias's POV, and he's a former Druskala and proud Fjerdan, and one of the book's main settings is Fjerda. We get to see basically the Nazi regime, how it works, and its hypocrisies up close and personal. That was definitely striking for me. I did vaguely remember it from the first time I read this book, but it definitely hit a lot more rereading it. Even the different countries' treatment of Grisha, which we got to see more of in this book than in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, very much parallels real life and actual history. For example, the most well-known home of the Grisha is Ravka, which is inspired by Tsarist Russia, and it is a widely held belief amongst the rest of the world that most, if not all, Jews come from Eastern Europe. On the flip side, Grisha from other countries are not very well known, and none of them have a similar stronghold, I guess you could say, in their native countries, similar to lots of Jewish people outside of Eastern Europe, or at least outsiders' perception of Jews in those places, if they even realize that there are Jews in other countries, which many people do not. And finally, Grisha's status, depending on where you are and what that status is, very much mirrors Jews' real-life status throughout history and in the present. Both the fictional Grisha and real-life Jews can have a variety of statuses depending on where they live or where they're from. Sometimes they are protected but greatly feared by outsiders. Sometimes they are subjects of cruel experiments and torture. Sometimes they are used as weapons. Sometimes they are tortured and killed simply for existing. We see all of these different statuses and several others in Jewish history and sometimes in the present that is reflected in how various countries and communities treat the Grisha who live there and elsewhere. It's given me a lot to think about as a Jewish reader of a highly allegorical novel written by a Jewish writer, probably based on some of her own experiences as a Mizrahi Moroccan Jew and a conditionally white Ashkenazi Jew. It's interesting to see all the different sides of Jewish history reflected in a book that's supposed to be about 6 kids pulling off a crazy heist. Anyways, Six of Crows is a very good book, and even the less than ideal audiobook recording could not change that. I very much enjoyed myself reading this. It gave me a lot to think about, and I'm excited to read Crooked Kingdom, despite the fact that I will be subjected to the same shitty audiobook that I read the first time, which I was hoping to avoid this go-around and seemingly cannot. That's all for now. Bye. Hello again. Last night I finished Crooked Kingdom at last. All in all, I give it 5 stars. Our first 5-star book in the Grishaverse, and one of the few 5-star books I have read this year so far. Amazing. Before I get into the content of the book, I need to discuss the format again. It just has such a big impact on the story for me, and I need to get it. Just like with Six of Crows, I have read Crooked Kingdom before. I listened to a YouTube bootleg of the audiobook, which cut off at the end, and then I was like, not worth it to find another one, whatever. This is the first time I have read the entire book. I could not find a readily available ebook of Crooked Kingdom anywhere, so I had to stick with the audiobook format, even though it's not my favorite. That bootleg is gone, so I had to use another one of my precious free Audible credits to get the audiobook because I could not find it anywhere else. Getting the official audiobook this time meant that the audio quality was better, and I had the entire book, so 2 thumbs up for that. To the book's credit, the fact that it's still 5 stars despite all of these issues with the audiobook should tell you how good it is. First issue with the audiobook, it's so fucking long. It was 18 hours. This time, I learned my lesson. I put it at 1.5 speed from the beginning, which made it 12 hours. It still took me several days to finish it, simply because I hit 3 or 4 points in the book where I was emotionally unprepared to continue, because Lee Bardugo had my heart in a chokehold, about to do something awful to one of my favorites. That was not really about the book. I understand that often audiobooks take longer to listen to than it might for someone to read the book. The trade-off is that you get a great performance of this book that you can listen to while you're doing other things. However, there were all these little things about the audiobook that kind of built up and made me go, why? Crooked Kingdom had all of the same readers as Six of Crows, with the exception of Wylan, who finally gets his own POV chapters, so there's a different voice actor narrating his chapters. The cast of the audiobook is not at fault here. They were just reading what they were told. They did a pretty good job with what they were given. It's not their fault that any of these issues happened. This is not a dig on any of them. It's unfortunate how it all turned out. The biggest problem from Jump is the same problem that we have in Six of Crows, which is that the voice actor for Kaz is miscast. His voice doesn't quite match Leigh Bardugo's description of what his voice is supposed to sound like. And I think that's the main reason why so many readers, myself included, find him to be an odd choice. They could have chosen someone else whose voice fit the description better. The second biggest issue for me is how long Wyland's chapters are. Most of them are 45 minutes to an hour compared to the rest of the chapters, which are about 20-ish minutes each. I understand that Leigh Bardugo wrote longer chapters for Wyland to try to make up for the fact that he didn't have any POV chapters in Six of Crows, and maybe it reads fine when you read the print book, but in the audiobook, it was too much. When you read a story like this, where there are so many POVs, staying in one POV for so long, in one sitting, is strange and makes you feel stuck. Leigh Bardugo was trying to fit 2 books worth of POV chapters into Crooked Kingdom, and it's only exacerbated by how Wyland's voice actor was directed to read it. It also makes me question why Wyland didn't have any POV chapters in the first book. He doesn't become more of a main character in Crooked Kingdom, and it's honestly weird that he doesn't have any POV chapters in Six of Crows. I don't understand that particular choice. I definitely don't understand the choices that whoever directed and edited this audiobook made. My third problem is really a collection of little problems, which is mispronunciation. It's very common knowledge within the Grishaverse fandom how these things are supposed to sound, and it's not accurate. I don't blame the actors. Everybody makes mistakes while they're working, and they don't get to decide what stays in and what gets re-recorded. I really am just looking at the director and editor of this audiobook who was sloppy. And it's not like it was one little thing. It was several mistakes that happened repeatedly. At one point, Nej pronounces Kaz as Kaz. I only remember catching it the one time. It could have been more than that. Extra embarrassing because they're supposed to be love interests. You should know how to say your potential significant other's name. And weird that it happened in both books. Another one that really irritated me was that at least 3 or 4 times, different characters pronounced Matthias incorrectly. I heard Matthias. I heard Matthias. There were probably some other ones, but those are the 2 that I remember. It happened multiple times throughout the book, mispronounced by different characters. It wasn't like one reader made one mistake and nobody caught it. Several of them made the mistake, probably because they weren't told how to pronounce it correctly, and then nobody bothered to re-record it. Who does that? The last one is the god of Kirch, who may or may not be a symbol for capitalist greed. Within the audiobook, the characters do not all pronounce it the same way. Some of them say Gezen, some of them say Gazen, and some of them switch back and forth between the 2 pronunciations. Again, not the reader's fault. Clearly, nobody told them how to pronounce these things, or they made a small mistake and nobody else caught it and thought we should really fix that. Come on, this is basic shit. This actually reminds me of something I heard the cast of Shadow and Bone talk about in a group interview. Apparently, Ben Barnes has not only read all the Grishaverse books, but is a major nerd. So when they started shooting season 1, he recorded a glossary of him pronouncing all of the words and terms that Leigh Bardugo created for the world. It should be standard protocol for any kind of fantasy or sci-fi series where a part of the world building is world-specific language. All these things that people might not know how to pronounce if they're not inside the author's head. It's a disservice to both the voice actors who worked on the audiobooks and to readers who are trying to enjoy the audiobooks. The reader for Jesper kept doing this weird thing where he would slip into a British accent and then slip back into an American one, and it would happen in the same line of dialogue. I'm sure it's something like the voice actor is actually British, but he was told to do an American accent to match the rest of the actors. But how did nobody catch that? And it doesn't sound like it was on purpose. It's not like he was reading Jesper's inner monologue in one accent and all of his dialogue in another accent, which I would still find weird, but at least it would be consistent. He was slipping back and forth between the two within the monologue and within the dialogue. It was odd. Last but not least, what the fuck is up with Zoya's accent? She doesn't have a POV in this book, but she has plenty of dialogue. Pretty consistently, all of the readers gave her the same ridiculous pseudo-Russian accent, which wasn't their choice, that was the director's choice. But why? It's bad. I don't know what is up with that. Way that they must have been coached to do the accent makes Zoya, who's supposed to be this very serious character, very powerful Grisha, sound like a caricature of a Russian person. Who did all of this? Alright, finally we can move on to the actual book. Hooray. First of all, plot, 10 out of 10, even though Matthias dies. I loved the heist. There were so many mini heists in one, and I really enjoyed that. It had so many twists and turns. It was thrilling. The running thought in my head the entire time was, oh my god, Kaz plans for fucking everything. At every turn, Kaz had plan A, B, C, D, E, and F, and an emergency eject button. Even though most of the time things didn't go according to plan A, it went according to one of those plans, and it's very impressive. I wish my brain worked like that. I like a good puzzle. I like reading the heisty stuff. I don't know that I could necessarily compete with Kaz Brecker's schemes. Kaz was able to plan so thoroughly that not only was every tiny aspect of the Crow's group mission accomplished, but pretty much all of the Crow's personal goals were accomplished as well. Getting Nina to Fjerda with Matthias's preserved body so that she can bury him, Wylan freeing himself of his father, taking over the business and taking care of his mom and Jesper's dad getting to go home safely and debt-free to restart his life, and the other Grisha refugees getting to safety in Ravka, which benefited not only them, but also Genya, Zoya, and Nikolai as Sturmhond. Inej getting to see her parents again, getting her ship, and being freed from her indenture. Kaz getting revenge on Jan Van Eyck and starting to get revenge on Pekka Rollins, not just with the heist itself, but also orchestrating its aftermath so that Pekka and Van Eyck would take the fall for all of the chaos that the Crows caused, and everybody would still leave with their money. Amazing. This whole scheme is a testament to Leigh Bardugo's skill and talent as a writer and a schemer herself, and I think it's especially cool because Kaz is her self-insert character. I don't think I've ever experienced a plot that wraps up so neatly with the way it ends. It is hinting at the King of Scars duology and things that happen in that. But in terms of what happens within the Six of Crows duology, everything ties together. There are no loose threads. It's pretty amazing. I aspire to be that kind of writer. I don't often cry at books, but Leigh Bardugo is apparently so talented that I cried 3 times. I cried when Matthias died. I cried at his little funeral at the end where all the crows say goodbye to him. And I cried at the Kinej ending when they're holding hands and Kaz gives her a ship and then her parents arrive. How can you not cry? In addition to being the queen of a scheming main plot, Leigh Bardugo is apparently a master of the romantic subplot. Thanks for crushing my heart. Fair play to you. A quick note on world building. World building in Six of Crows, as I previously mentioned, was already great. I loved it. Crooked Kingdom takes it one step further and is even better. I loved that we got to see the heist and the Crows' other antics through the lens of international political intrigue. We did get some of that in Six of Crows, but Crooked Kingdom definitely turned it up a notch. We got to see even more of the sort of political workings of the Grishaverse, and as a poli-sci international relations nerd, I find that really fascinating and entertaining. It had more of the feeling of this heist is happening amidst international intrigue, as opposed to in Six of Crows, which felt more like this heist just happens to involve 3 warring countries and breaking into a foreign prison. Let's get into the characters and their development in this book. Wylan is still a sweetie. He really has a backbone in this story. I love that he takes down his dad, rescues his mom, and even encourages Jesper to better himself as a person and learn how to use his Zoa, his Grisha powers. He's a sweet little golden retriever amongst the crows, and I love him for it. Any and all weird noises you hear are in fact my dog crawling on the floor and trying to eat my hand. Is really just chaos incorporated. Somehow even more than Jesper in this book, which I find incredible. He's quietly chaotic, whereas Jesper is very out there with his chaos. Speaking of Jesper, I cannot believe this boy's bullshit with Jesper. That was not consensual. Cool. You know that Jesper doesn't like you like that. Why are you trying to trick him into thinking that you're Wylan? I did not like that. However, that doesn't mean that I wanted Kuei to be assassinated by one of the many powers that be who wanted to kill him. I'm glad that he was able to escape to Ravka to safety and hopefully help fix his dad's mistakes. That brings us to Jesper. As always, he is chaotic, but in this book we really get to see him learn to live with it and embrace it instead of fighting it, which is some really cool character growth. Chaos is in his nature, but he isn't at peace with it, and he doesn't learn to coexist with it until he starts fixing all the problems in his life, such as making up with Calm, embracing his Zoa, and starts to take steps towards being a better person for himself and his loved ones. So we love to see it. Which brings us to our buddy Colm. Poor guy. He did not ask for this chaos, but he ended up in it anyway. We don't see much of him, but I do love that at least one of the crows has a functional parent nearby who ends up parenting all of them like they're his little lost children. Don't forget, they're all like 70. Anyways, I was happy that it all ended up well for him in the end. He got out of debt, he got more money to invest into his farm and maybe a nice retirement in the future. He improved his relationship with Jesper. He started to accept who Jesper is and that Jesper wants to learn how to use his abilities. Most importantly, he got out of Kirch and away from all the barrel bosses and merchers who probably would string him up for pretending to be Johannes Riedwelt. Next up is Nina. She is still a badass. She becomes a leader in this book. I really loved her journey of her embracing her new powers, as odd and different as they may be, and learning to appreciate them and use them. Love that for her. What I did not appreciate, however, was what happened to the love of her life. Matthias really got me on his side. I loved Matthias in this book. He had an excellent redemption arc. second only to Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is the gold standard of redemption arcs. He comes second because his redemption arc ends abruptly and we don't get to see what else he would have done in his life. But it was a pretty great redemption arc, and I was here for it. I loved him becoming a better person, especially under the quote-unquote bad influences of Nina and the other crows. That juxtaposition of him becoming a better person under supposed bad influences after the supposed good influence of the Drusilla and the Fjerdan army made him into a worse person. Throughout the duology, we get a lot in Matthias's POV chapters and some in Nina's POV chapter about who Matthias really was from the time he was a small child versus who the Drusilla made him to be, and how they took advantage of his grief and made him into a killing machine. I really loved the full circle element of Matthias returning to the sweet boy that he was before the Drusilla remade him in their image. One of my favorite parts about his whole arc is how he inverts the belief system that was drilled into him as a Drusilla and finds what he believes is the true meaning of being a Drusilla, being Fjerdan, and being a devout follower of the god Gel. I loved his turnaround from the idea that Grisha are against Gel, his god, to the Grisha exist because of Gel and are a blessing from Gel. I loved him realizing that Nina was his true home and that his purpose is to protect her and to protect her people, the Grisha, by helping to deprogram other Drusilla. It felt like he was reconciling who he was before, during, and after his time as a Drusilla. I really loved that arc for him. Moving on to Inej, my favorite person, the love of my life. One of the things I loved most about Crooked Kingdom is that she finds her purpose and frees herself instead of being freed by others. Other people help her along the way, but it's really a shift in her mindset and her beliefs about herself that free her and allow her to seek out her true purpose. She goes from victim to survivor, follower to leader, and becomes an avenging angel for other people who have experiences of trafficking and exploitation. Similar to Matthias, she reconciles all of the different versions of herself and becomes whole again, what that means. As much as I loved Matthias's reconciliation of the different aspects of himself and his life, I loved Inej's even more. The phases and aspects of her life were so drastically different, and most of them were defined by things that were done to her as opposed to choices that she made. I also really like that she reconciles her faith with who she's had to become in Ketterdam. By the end of the story, she is both Inej, the kind, caring, Suli acrobat who loves her friends and family and will do anything for them, and the Wraith, the most dangerous girl in Ketterdam, who has killed many, will kill many more in protection of herself and others. I think my favorite moment in this journey was at the end of the book, where she is reflecting not just on her faith and who she has become, but about girls like her who aren't the chosen ones, and how she defines herself and how she sees herself. Not only did I love that for Inej, but I appreciated that for myself. Her reflection on not being the chosen one very much encapsulates how I feel about Shadow and Bone versus Six of Crows. I like the Six of Crows duology better than the Shadow and Bone trilogy because it's not about the chosen ones. It's about the people who make their own way and make their own fortune in a world that can be very cruel to those who are not chosen. I find stories like this much more interesting than stories of chosen ones. I honestly am bored of the chosen one trope. It's been done too many times, and I'm over it. I like stories like this better. Moving on to Kaz. Dirty Hands comes clean as a human. Who would have thought that he would actually let people in, much less his best friends and the love of his life? Somehow his schemes in Crooked Kingdom topped the schemes in Six of Crows. The Ice Court was the least crazy scheme in this duology. Don't understand it. I love that he gets his revenge for himself and for Jordy. I also love the character growth of him helping the crows get their revenge. It's a true sign of friendship when the bastard of the barrel says, yes, I will help you achieve your revenge as well. I also love him stepping out of the shadows and becoming the real leader of the dregs as he was the entire time and kicking Per Haskell to the fucking curb. Because that dude is a creep well past his time. Kaz is finally an actual barrel boss instead of a sort of barrel boss. Good for him. Most importantly, he realizes that some things and people, perhaps, such as Inej and the crows, are more important than being dirty hands and running schemes. That was great. I really loved that for him. I also love seeing Nikolai / Sturmhond, Jenya, and Zoya. I wish that David was there too. Where's my baby? Love him. By the way, I was like, how long is it going to take Kaz to figure out that Sturmhond is actually the king of Ravka? The answer was 10 minutes. Last but not least, we're going to talk about my shit list, aka the characters who did the worst, and what I thought about them. I was so glad that they all got their comeuppance, except Broom, but I think that's coming in King of Scars, so it's okay. Inej attacking Pekka in his sleep, chef's kiss. Best moment of my life. Kaz and Wylan besting Van Eck at his own stupid game, priceless. The crows duping 4 different governments, amazing. Okay, next up, the relationships and relationship development. There are 4 main relationships in Crooked Kingdom, and I have assigned them all a ranking. First up, we have the crows. 8 out of 10. Love what we got, but I wanted more downtime and more bonding during downtime. The ghost fight scene in Six of Crows, I wanted more of that. We didn't have time, it's okay, but I wish we did. Next up, Wesper. 7 out of 10. I love them, but there was not enough development in either book. Perhaps it would have been less noticeable if the other 2 ships had less development, but it's a stark contrast, unfortunately, as much as I love Wylan and Jesper as individuals and as a couple. That brings us to Helnik. 9 out of 10. Was really on board with them in this book. I loved every second, and I wanted more of them. I also wanted Matthias to not die, but I don't have the power to go back in time and change Lee Bardugo's mind. It is what it is. Last, but certainly not least, Kanej. 10 out of 10. Loved every minute. Absolutely perfect. Immaculate. Holding hands with no gloves at the end. He got her a ship. He found her parents. He got her out of her indenture. He got her money. He rose to meet her standards and become a better man. He took off his armor, so to speak, as she had requested. And that tending to the wound scene, I loved it. It was hands down one of the best slow burns ever written. Lee Bardugo truly shows her mastery of the romantic subplot with these 2. Kaz is the biggest romantic there is, and anyone who says otherwise is either ignorant or lying. That is the truth. Those are all of my thoughts on Crooked Kingdom and the Six of Crows duology. I really loved the Six of Crows duology, especially Crooked Kingdom, and I'm sad that it's over. What a ride, man. all that's left in our main story in the Grishaverse is the King of Scars duology. I'm really excited. I know it combines a lot of my favorite characters and plot lines, so I cannot wait. There are a lot of things that I want to see. The opener better be Nina burying Matthias in Fjerda, then assassinating Broom and burning him on a Grisha pyre so he can't go to jail. Can't wait for Nina to wreak havoc in Fjerda and rebuild it better. I would really like Tamar and Nadia to join the Wraith as Inej's first mate and Squalor. I better see some Nikolai and David chaos. I am thrilled for Zoilai. That's all from me for now. I will see you guys next time for the King of Scars duology. Bye.